What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have a lot of volleyball to discuss, as it is NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament time. Yes, we have finally approached the climax to the 2022 NCAA Women's Volleyball season. Which team will emerge victorious in the 64-team tournament? And which team kind of got left out? Also, the NBA makes news as they have recently announced a new team. Yes, the NBA is continuing to grow as they have announced lucky number 13, a part of their NBA family. Which team is it? Which city is getting the lucky team to become a volleyball city? And the AVP has its last tournament as well, as the Central Florida Open is open for business, and it's sure to be a great climax to the end of the AVP season. So hand me a volleyball, set the net, because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday evening, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made your way into episode 170 of Set Point. Without any further delay, let's get on into that volleyball action. But first and foremost, IE Sports Radio is the one that is providing Set Point. And without IE Sports Radio, there is no Set Point, and there is no other shows on said IE Sports Radio platform. IE Sports Radio can be found on Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok at IE Sports Radio. They can also be found on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then Sports, then Radio. They also have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, and when you go there, you'll see a Patreon link at the top, which starts at $5 a month. This will get you a shout from all of our shows, including this one, and higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IESRU, the podcasting university of IE Sports Radio, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment with Larry B. Because for the past 8 years and counting, IE Sports Radio has been dedicating themselves to all major sports cities around the country and making tailor-made shows dedicated to sports and having special guests on, such as coaches, athletes, and other authorized media personnel dedicated to all major sports cities and major sports shows in general across the country. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans. And with your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. Big shout out to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, Key to the Gate, a donor that wishes to remain anonymous, and Marcus Losgreat. Also, the holidays are approaching, so definitely log on to iesportsradio.com and go to the gift shop where there are ornaments that are handmade, and there are also IE Sports Radio ornaments that can be put on any tree whatsoever. And without any further delay, let's get on into that volleyball action. So everyone is probably thinking I'm going to start with the NCAA women's volleyball bracket. No, we have other volleyball to get into, as the NBA actually made the news last week. Okay, it's not bad news, but the NBA did announce last week that they have a new team involved in its new league. Introducing, can we get a drum roll, please? So without any further delay, the new NBA team that has come to the NBA is none other than the Philadelphia Founders. The Philadelphia Founders are the new NBA team to have been revealed. This was revealed, I want to say last Tuesday, if not late last Monday. Regardless, It's great to see another NBA team. And let me just tell you, it's a great thing to see volleyball involved in Philadelphia. I'm going to be 100% honest. Volleyball isn't really the biggest thing in Philadelphia. Obviously, because the Philadelphia has the Philadelphia Eagles, which are doing well, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Philadelphia Union, which just went to the MLS Cup. Like, Philadelphia is a big sports city, but volleyball isn't really like the first sport there. And I don't think it's really all that well known for volleyball. But now the NBA has come to the city of brotherly love, and now volleyball is going to be thriving in Philadelphia, which is awesome. So the new owner and general manager is Andrew Lee. Andrew Lee actually formerly managed the Chicago Untouchables, and he is currently the head coach at Rosemont University's women's volleyball team. And Rosemont University is an NCAA Division III school located in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, which is near the Philadelphia area. Lee, in addition to his duties as the owner and general manager of the Founders, as well as being a head coach at Rosemont University, he is also a head coach at the TNT Volleyball Club in Philadelphia. So that's a little bit of a gist of Andrew Lee, the new owner / general manager / head coach of the Philadelphia Founders. And tryouts for the Philadelphia Founders will be in early 2023. So this is big time right here. Like, Philadelphia is a big sports market city, and the fact that they got an NBA team is huge, especially since it's up east. And again, not much volleyball is happening up east outside of there is volleyball in Pennsylvania. You've got Pitt, you've got Penn State on the men's and women's side, but nothing in Philadelphia. But with the Philadelphia Founders being introduced, this is big time right here. And I didn't even know what Rosemont University was. I'm going to be 100% honest. I did not know what Rosemont University is. And the fact that he is coaching this team as well as being the owner / manager / coach of the Philadelphia Founders is quite something. And he has NBA experience. He was the former manager, as I said, of the Chicago Untouchables, and now he is going to be heading up east from the Windy City as he'll be heading to the land of brotherly love. And it works out for him, just because he doesn't have to leave Pennsylvania to go over to Illinois. So basically, that's that little bit of NBA news right there. And honestly, it's great to see the NBA growing. We're up to 13 teams now, or the NBA is up to 13 teams. I say we, even though I'm not really officially introduced as a member of the NBA. But either way, the NBA is at 13 teams. This does kind of boast a little bit of a problem. What does this mean for both conferences, the American Conference and the National Conference? This means that unless the NBA has another team on the horizon, which they'll probably be introducing, it's going to probably be it having an odd number of teams means that there's going to have to be some sort of new system, which I hope the NBA can get done, especially since it's a odd number of teams that can't be divided equally. It can't be evenly distributed unless there's a different conference that differs from the other conferences. So currently right now we have the Los Angeles Blaze, the Orange County Stunners, the Inland Empire Matadors, the reigning champion Las Vegas Ramblers. We have the Texas Tyrants, the Dallas Tornadoes, the Seattle Kraken, the Seattle Sasquatch, the Colorado Kraken, getting the NHL mixed into this. We have the New Jersey Freedom, and then we also and we have the Chicago Untouchables, like I said. We have the Philadelphia Founders, that's 11, and I'm blanking on the other names of the NBA teams. I should know this off the top of my head. I'm going to be a part of this. Oh yeah, we have Southern Exposure, which I hate how they don't have their official name. And then we also have the Utah Stingers. And then, yeah, that's it. So that's pretty much all of the NBA teams right there. I know I had to basically cheat a little, but it's been a while since I've covered the NBA. So in lieu of this whole new Philadelphia Founders team being introduced to the NBA, I actually came up with some clever NBA teams that I personally came up of. Now, I'm not going to really pitch this idea to the head honcho Nick England unless he thinks I can he wants my opinion. But these are just my personal team names that I think of, that I thought of. So we'll start off with this first one. And by the way, these are all kind of big market cities, big market sports cities. I basically had to think of like big market sports cities. I'm not going to say like the Champagne Chanticleers or something like that. Like that probably could be a good little city name, but I'm not going to go that far. I just thought of like big market cities. Like, you know how the NBA has Los Angeles, and then Seattle's another one. Dallas is one of them. Texas as a whole is one of them. Chicago's a big market city. New Jersey, the New Jersey Freedom or Team Freedom, that's all another big market city. Las Vegas is starting to become a big market city. So my list is comprised of big market cities. So the first team name that I thought of is the Boston Bravehearts. By the way, I did some research and I made sure that all of these names were not obviously taken. Like, I'm not going to say like the Washington Generals just because that was clearly taken. So I'm not going to say that, even though I think most people were rumored that the Washington football team, or now the Commanders, was supposed to be the Washington Generals. But I digress on that. So my first team name that I thought of is the Boston Bravehearts. Second team name I have is the Portland Passion. Don't know how that could work, but what can you do? Then the New York Navigators, which I think could be a good little team name. Then the San Francisco Silver Knights. That one may be a little bit of a stretch, but for me, I think a team in NorCal would be beneficial. You could also go with Sacramento, just because they have the Kings, the Sacramento Kings. And then we also have the Kansas City Condors. Now, I added Kansas City just because Kansas City is starting to grow as a major sports city. You've obviously got the Kansas City Chiefs. You've got the Kansas City Current, the NWSL team. You have Sporting KC, the MLS team, and then you also have the Kansas City Royals. And the only volleyball that's involved in Kansas City is UMKC, the Roos. So I decided to throw in the Kansas City Condors as a possible NBA team as well. Then we have the Washington Whirlwinds, then the Atlanta Antelopes, then the Minnesota Mounties, or Mountaineers, or either or works. Then we've got the Detroit Dynamo or the Detroit Dashers. You can't go wrong with either of those ones. Then you have the Cleveland Cadets, then Indiana Inferno, then the Ohio IceHawks, and then the last one that I thought of was the Pittsburgh Pistons. Again, these are just my creative names. If Nick England wants my personal take on or a possible name, then he'll have these names. Then I'll pitch him these team names. But these are just my personal opinion names of an NBA team. And honestly, if one of these gets selected, then so be it. But if not, then I'm not going to hold my breath, or I'm not going to bite my tongue too much. But either way, those are all my NBA teams, and that's pretty much all the NBA news I have. The NBA will be starting probably in about February. I don't have the official schedule, and I wish the schedule would get here soon so I can make my plans. I have been hearing that the NBA might be in Long Beach this season. This is not official. These are just murmurs and rumors, but the NBA might be in Long Beach as opposed to being in San Bernardino. If that is the case, that would make my life a lot more better than it was going to San Bernardino, which it wasn't bad. I won't say that San Bernardino is bad, but I mean, it's just a longer trip for me, whereas in Long Beach, it's not too far. My only qualm with playing in Long Beach would be, where would the matches be played at? Unless you're planning to play at a Long Beach volleyball club, which has a big time facility, like the Pierce Sports Center in San Bernardino, or you basically get the Pyramid to play the NBA matches. But you kind of have to that kind of crosses over with Long Beach State's men's volleyball season. So it's just my little food for thought if the matches were to be played at Long Beach. Which, again, I don't mind where the matches are played at. It's just that when it comes springtime all the way up down to summertime, it gets hot up in San Bernardino. It gets pretty hot, so yeah, stay cool, y'all. So that is that for all of the NBA news. Jumping on over to the AVP action. So we have an AVP tournament this week. Yes, we have AVP action. And this is actually the last AVP tournament of the season. So we've gone through a lot of AVP tournaments. And this one will actually be on the Pro Series side, as this one will be heading down to the Sunshine State, as the AVP will be heading to the Central Florida Open for its tournament, as it'll be located at the Hickory Point Recreation Park on the shores of Lake Harris. It's going to be located at Tavares, Florida, and the main draw is 16 teams, and the prize purse is what they call it, or the cash prize is $125,000. So here is basically the gist of it. 16-team main draw, 8 automatic entries, 2 wildcard AVP pairs. Additional auto entries will be allocated if no wild cards are granted. 4 teams advance to the 2022 Virginia Tour Series, which was supposed to be held on August 27th and 28th, but did not go through. And then 2 teams advanced from the 2022 Huntington Beach Tour Series, which happened a couple of weeks ago. So this is that's basically for per gender. So that's basically the event details right there. To the entry list, on the men's side, the top overall seed is Kame Schulk and Theo Brunner. Then we have Taylor Crabb and Phil Dalhauser as the 2 seed. Triborn and John Hayden are the 3 seed. And Chase Budinger, the former NBA player, and Reed Pretty are the 4 seed. And then the main draw, I guess they're all in the main draw. They're all in the main draw. Interesting. So they're all in the main draw, so basically this is just a standard 16-team tournament, and I'm sure there's going to be a loser's bracket. So Avery Drost and his partner Chase Frischman are both also in this tournament. They finished runner-up in the Huntington Beach Open behind Team Taylor Crabb, and Taylor Sander, which Taylor Crabb is in this tournament, but he is not partnered up with Taylor Sander. He is partnered up with Phil Dalhauser, a.k.a. the Slim Reaper. And it looks like there is no Taylor Sander, which is disappointing, but it is what it is. Maybe he needed a little bit of a break, which is totally understandable. Like, being an AVP player is tough work, especially when you're flying all over the place, like city to city. It can be somewhat tiresome. So that's on the men and women's side. Or the men's side. The women's side, there will not be Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng, a.k.a. Clace, participating. That I will discuss in a little bit. But your top seed for the women's side is Gina Urango. I think that's how it's pronounced. Urango or Urango. Either way, Gina Urango and Emily Day are the top seed. Then Corinne Quiggle and Sarah Schermerhorn are the 2 seed. Molly Turner and Caitlin Mullaney are the 3 seed. And then Deanna Kraft and Allie Wheeler are the 4 seed. So, Katie Horton and Brooke Bauer, the runner-up from the Huntington Beach Open, they are actually the 9 seed, which that's kind of interesting, but I guess that's more fuel for the fire. I'll be interested to see what Katie Horton and Brooke Bauer have in store for us. Jessica Gaffney and Savvy Simo are the 10 seed, and then Carly Skojit, Katie Dickens are the 8 seed, and that's pretty much it. Everyone else is a main draw participant, like the men's side of things. So it's basically going to be 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, you get it. So that's pretty much that for the AVP. Like I said, this is the last tournament of the season. It really went by so quickly. We had a lot of news. We had a young pair being crowned in the Phoenix Championship, which was the big-time granddaddy of them all. I mean, obviously, everyone calls the Manhattan Beach Open the granddaddy of them all, but the Phoenix Championships is like the Super Bowl of all the AVPs, in my opinion. And then Team Taylor Sander, and Taylor Crabb, they both came up big, and now they've boomed to becoming a big-time pair. So the AVP season has been something to remember, and overall it's in good hands, especially on the women's side. There's a lot of young pairs, and we got to see Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng reunite, which I think is awesome. And I think that is perfect segue to go into this next little topic. So Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng won their first international tournament ever since reuniting, as they actually won a tournament. I'm going to mispronounce this tournament's name, but they won a tournament over the weekend, and they didn't even lose a set. So y'all remember my interview with Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng following the Huntington Beach Open. They told me that they were heading all the way down to Australia to participate in the Torquay Challenge, and they were able to do so, and they were able to come out victorious with gold, which is amazing. The more impressive thing is that they did not drop a set. So if you're all keeping track with me, they didn't drop a set in the Huntington Beach Open, and they didn't drop a set in the Torquay Challenge, which I think is very impressive. And I know they had a little bit of a somewhat scare in the Huntington Beach Open. They had a little bit of a scare in terms of possibly losing a set. But this pair is already looking impressive as of right now. Like, they've won an AVP tournament, which is very impressive, and they've won a international tournament on their first try for both of them. So the fact that Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes are not skipping any beats in terms of not lacking any communication or lacking team chemistry is very impressive. I really think that these two have the beach volleyball world on notice, and who knows, maybe they could be, hence the word could. I'm not trying to put them on a pedestal just yet, but they could be a possible Olympic pair come beach volleyball time. But we still have to see what April Ross has in store, as well as her partner and what that's going to be like. I think April Ross might be veering toward the path of coaching. I'm not entirely sure, but either way, we'll see what happens with April Ross and everything else in terms of the U.S. The Olympics don't start till 2024. We all don't need to worry about that. We're all good. So, my big congratulations to Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng on their tournament win in the Torquay Challenge. They won't be participating in the Central Florida Open just because that is it's too much of a turnaround going from one country all the way back to the other and then preparing for this tournament, and they have to fly over there. That's just too much strain on the body. So they're probably just going to enjoy the rest and relaxation, keep on training, and more importantly, they will be preparing for the next AVP season, which should be quite promising for them, just because the two have a bright future going forward. And as long as they stay healthy and they stay together, they're set. So going onward, we have, that's pretty much it for all the beach volleyball news right there. I gotta say, the AVP season flew by quickly, though it was an extended season. You gotta remember, this was an AVP tournament, AVP season that had a lot of tournaments happening this past season, and I really think that this is. I hope they continue to have the whole schedule like they did last year, or like they did this year. Like, there were a lot of tournaments, and they went to all sorts of cities. They went to Austin, New Orleans, Muskegon, Denver, Waupaca, Hermosa Beach, Atlantic City, Fort Lauderdale, Atlanta, Manhattan Beach. They sadly did not go to, they went to Virginia Beach, then they went to Chicago, and then obviously Phoenix, and then Huntington Beach, and now Central Florida. So I'm excited to see what the AVP has to close for this season, and I can't wait for next season. All right, now that's going to do it for the beach volleyball portion of the show. Now let's get on into Week 14 of the NCAA women's volleyball season. Y'all are probably chomping at the bit, and you're probably wondering, where is this NCAA women's volleyball going to come? It's going to have to wait a little bit because we have a little high school volleyball to discuss. So, as we all know, Cathedral Catholic finished the perfect 42-0. I'm sorry to basically do to you, like doppelgang you like that, or to basically rickroll you, but we got a little high school volleyball to talk about. So Cathedral Catholic is the unanimous number one, as they were pretty much named the number one team on the MaxPreps and USA Today high school girls volleyball rankings this past week, as they finished the season a perfect 42-0, having only lost one set, which is downright impressive, and it's an impressive season nonetheless. Now, one thing I don't like is that St. Francis was the number 11 team going into that CIF Open Division State Championship match, and then they lose that one, and they tumble all the way down to 22, which I don't really think that's fair. But they didn't have the undefeated season like Cathedral Catholic did. But overall, St. Francis was impressive, and I really think that they still had a great season. They finished the season at number 22 in the nation, and Cathedral Catholic, as I basically mentioned, they were the number 1 team in the nation. Then Cornerstone Christian of San Antonio finished number 2. Marion of Bloomfield Hills finishes number 3. Hamilton Southeastern finishes number 4. Fayetteville finishes number 5. Mother McCauley of Chicago finishes number 6. Prestonwood Christian of Plano, Texas finishes 7th. Miracosta of Manhattan Beach finishes 8th. Sierra Canyon of Chatsworth finishes 9th. And then Buford finishes 10th in the top 10 of the MaxPreps rankings. I'm only going to do the top 10 just because I don't think everyone else wants to just listen to me ramble on about the top 25. But those are the top 10 of the MaxPreps rankings. But congratulations to Cathedral Catholic on the undefeated season and for winning pretty much everything that they could have imagined. And only losing one set the whole season is quite amazing. And all of the state tournament, they didn't have Julia Blyashov, who was out with the ankle injury, and the fact that they're able to basically win without her was darn right impressive. So I can't wait to see what Cathedral Catholic has in store for us next year, and they're going to have a different look. Obviously, they're losing 10 seniors, but they should still be one of the top teams in California. Now let's get on into the NCAA women's volleyball side of things. So Week 14 brought a lot of twists and turns, as basically we had Wisconsin. They performed well. They beat Nebraska at Duvaney, beating them in 4 sets, and then which clinched the Big Ten Conference Championship. Then they also beat Ohio State the day after in 4 sets as well. So they were very impressive, and they basically showed that why they're the reigning Big Ten and NCAA volleyball champions. Also, we had Pitt outlasting Georgia Tech last Wednesday in 5 sets, and then they swept Boston College on Saturday, which basically gave them a share of the ACC title. Louisville swept Notre Dame, which was no surprise, as Louisville clinched the other half of the ACC title, which is very impressive by the Cardinals for them to repeat as conference champions. Though they had to share it, but you can't control what you can't control. So, and then we also had Stanford locking up the Pac-12, which was no surprise. Kentucky and Florida shared the SEC title, as Kentucky swept South Carolina both times. Florida swept Ole Miss the first time and nearly got reverse swept the second time. Fortunately, the Gators had a little bit more left in the tank to outlast the Rebels and basically wind up winning the SEC altogether. So that's basically how the SEC was won. And then Texas was obviously the Big 12 conference champion. I shouldn't say that in a mean way, but there was no doubt they were going to win. I think they were crowned Big 12 champions the week prior, just because they were just so dominant. And then in the Big East, Creighton was able to outlast Marquette in the finals. Basically, Marquette and Marquette and Creighton are the modern day and St. John Bosco of girls volleyball in the Big East Conference. It's most likely going to be those two, unless, of course, UConn or St. John's has anything to say, but it's mostly going to be Creighton and Marquette in the Big East Conference Championship. Creighton was able to come out victorious, winning in 5 sets in the final, which was a big-time win for them. It avenged their earlier loss, which they lost last week to Marquette in 3 sets, which was obviously disappointing. To the AAC, UCF was able to outlast Houston, which was quite incredible. I was very impressed that UCF was able to win, which it's no surprise because they've been pretty much perfect throughout the entire year. Their only loss came against Houston. McKenna Melville was just outstanding. I'll talk about her in a little bit, but UCF and Houston shared the AAC Conference Championship title, though Houston did win the automatic qualifier just because they won more sets than UCF did between the two teams, which was crucial right there. If Houston didn't force UCF into a fifth set, then it could have probably gone to numbers, and then heaven knows what it could have gone to following that. So, and then that is pretty much it. I mean, that's pretty much all of the ranked teams right there. I already mentioned Stanford was able to basically clinch the Pac-12 championship, which is no surprise right there. The West Coast Conference, San Diego was able to sweep BYU. I was a little concerned for this just because BYU is a very good home team for the most part, and playing in a little bit of a loud and ruckus environment is also crucial right there. And this was kind of the last test, and BYU obviously wanted to play spoiler. BYU had nothing to lose while San Diego was playing possibly for a top 4 seed. And to San Diego's dismay, they lost the first set, but then rebounded nicely in the second, third, and fourth set to basically win that match and give themselves a good shot for a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. I'll give credit to BYU. They really came to play in that first set, but then they kind of ran low on steam. But that does not mean they're a bad team by any means. I think BYU can make some noise come NCAA tournament time, but we'll see. So now let's jump on over to our stat stuffers and notable numbers. So starting with the stat stuffers, we have Vanessa Ramirez of Utah surpassing 1,000 digs last week, which was impressive. Very impressive. Savannah Vox surpassed 4,000 assists with Miami as she became only the 4th player in program history to do so. McKenna Melville, who I talked about in Central Florida's win over Houston, she obviously is UCF's all-time kill leader, but she also moved into 10th all-time in NCAA women's volleyball kills, and she's only the 10th player to surpass 2,500 kills as well, which I think is darn right impressive. So the fact that she's still putting up those numbers is really amazing, and I hope she plays pro. I think she could probably... Well, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say maybe she could play on the U.S. national team, but it's what she wants, and it's what Karch Karai wants. Anyway, going to Georgia Tech, Julia Bergman actually surpassed 500 kills last week, and this was all in one season, not in her whole career. Julia Bergman has a lot more kills than just 500. She had 500 kills on this season alone, which is very impressive, and it strengthens her odds of possibly becoming the AVCA Player of the Year. And unfortunately for her, she did not get ACC Player of the Year. That honor actually went to Claire Chaussee of Louisville. So unfortunately, she did not get Player of the Year, but it is what it is. Like, you can't get mad at her for having that type of season and falling short to Player of the Year. I mean, Louisville was Louisville, and they were a machine for the most part. Claire Chaussee is a woman on a mission, and again, I wouldn't be surprised if she played professional as well as if she played international volleyball. I don't know. But Julia Bergman did great things, and she's going to continue to do great things, especially since Georgia Tech is in the NCAA tournament. And then Morgan Chacon of Long Beach State surpassed 1,000 digs last Saturday against UC Riverside, and most of her digs came from Florida State. But I'm not going to take away from the fact that she had 1,000 digs with Long Beach State as well as Florida State. So good job to her. She also surpassed 1,000 kills a few weeks ago. So she had a 1,000 by 1,000 season, which is quite impressive. And then Callie Schwarzenbach of Long Beach State surpassed 500 blocks last Saturday, as most of her blocks did come from Nebraska, but she was able to make the most of her season and surpass that 500 block mark with the Beach. And she obviously celebrated her senior night. This is her last season, as she is going to be going off and playing professionally most likely. Speaking of Long Beach State's women's volleyball coach Tyler Hildebrand finished his debut season with the Beach 19-9. Now you're probably wondering, what's so special about that? They didn't win the Big West Conference, but here's the big thing about that. The 19 wins are now the most by any first-year head coach at Long Beach State on the women's side, surpassing the previous and Long Beach living legend, Brian Gimolaro, who had 18 in his debut season. So, Tyler Hildebrand, I'm just going to go on a little bit of a, not tangent, but just going to go on a little bit of a blurb here. Tyler Hildebrand really has done wonders for Long Beach State this season. Let me tell you about Long Beach State as a whole in a little bit, but the 19 wins just goes to show that Long Beach has improved drastically, and they increased in wins by 3, they lowered their loss total by 6, and then they finished tied for 3rd in the Big West Conference, which last year they finished 6th. So the fact that there was amazing progress, it just goes to show that Long Beach State has improved, and they made I feel it's a home run of a hire. Obviously, Hawaii still has their number in the Big West Conference, and they didn't really fully turn the corner, but there is improvement, and they also had more fans in the stands, as they had. There was an increase in fan attendance when it came to the Pyramid, which was quite impressive. Just because last week they actually had a holiday weekend, but more on that later. And then they also won 14 wins. They also won 14 matches in a row, which was the longest winning streak since 2014. So again, Long Beach State had quite a number of improvements this season under Tyler Hildebrand. And spoiler alert, I'm actually going to be making a blog out of all of the Long Beach State women's volleyball matches and what I learned. Just go on to www.iesportsradio.com and keep a lookout for that blog when it comes to Long Beach State women's volleyball. Now, it's actually the next perfect segue to go to when it comes to my next topic, my night at Long Beach State as they played UC Riverside. So, obviously, this was the last match of the season for Long Beach State and for UC Riverside, as the Beach played the Highlanders. This was Long Beach State's senior night, and I'm just going to skim through the match. Long Beach State took care of business. They were strong against Riverside for the most part. They got to play a good portion of their bench, but more importantly, their seniors got to shine, such as Victoria O'Sullivan, who transferred from San Diego State. You also have Callie Schwarzenbach, who came up big in the middle. She transferred from Nebraska. And then Dylan De La Cruz, she was not a transfer. She had actually played at Long Beach State her entire career, and she played for Long Beach altogether. She played high school volleyball at Long Beach Poly, and she also played volleyball at Long Beach Mizuno. If not, she played at Seal Beach, but I'm pretty sure she played at Long Beach Mizuno. So either way, it was a senior night to remember for Long Beach State. They had a number of amazing highlights, and it was just smooth sailing for the most part. Now, for UC Riverside, here's the thing. It was obviously a forgettable season. The win and loss column, everyone's probably going to look at the win and loss column and just say, oh my God, what the heck, dude? Keep in mind they did have a new head coach in Nicky Cannon, but she has done an amazing job. Her players are more responsive, and you can't expect a first-year head coach to basically turn a bottom team and turn it into a conference champion overnight. It does not work that way. As my boy Marcus Los Great once said, a house is never built overnight. So for Nicky Cannon, obviously this was a tough season, but they put some scares into some teams. They took certain teams to 5, like Cal State Fullerton, Long Beach State, and a few others as well. Obviously, the record does not indicate a whole lot of growth, but I think UC Riverside improved for the most part in terms of their players like responding, and in terms of their players just, buying into the whole thing. And she is very encouraging as a volleyball coach. I really think Nicky Cannon has a bright future with UC Riverside, and I really think that the Highlanders can possibly improve to the point where they could possibly get out of that lower cellar of the Big West Conference and rise up to like the mid, if not the top tier of the Big West Conference. Again, it's going to take a little while, but after the match, obviously Long Beach State won in 3, but the match was what I wasn't concerned about for UC Riverside. After the match, I caught up with UC Riverside women's volleyball head coach Nicky to discuss the season, a recap of the season, and basically to talk about her seniors. She had 4 seniors departing this season, and talk about what's going to be next for the up-and-coming season. So here's my post-game interview with UC Riverside women's volleyball coach Nicky Cannon. All right, Coach. Obviously, it's the end of the season. A bittersweet moment for you all as you all had your ups and downs. What are some positives to this season in your first year?
Oh, man. Positive. I was just telling them. I was like, I know the win and loss column doesn't define it. And it definitely does not define them and the change that they have already made on UCR volleyball. And I hope that they see what everybody else sees in the fight, in the believe, how they worked hard together for each other. I mean, those are all such amazing building blocks to what this program's about to be. So, yeah.
What have you as a head coach learned in your first season at UC Riverside?
Oh my God, too much to mention.
I'm trying not to ask the tough ones.
No, I've learned so much. I mean, everything from, being a better manager and being a better connector and being, better in those hard moments, knowing, being true in what I believe in myself and in this program, and in the culture that I'm building, and never letting the wins and the losses waver that, Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I mean, gosh, year one, there's so much to learn. It's exciting. It's exciting though.
Mm-hmm. And when you first came to UC Riverside, how nervous were you taking over this program, and what were your emotions going into the season?
I mean, nerves, yes, more excitement than anything. I knew I had an amazing, staff with Ariel and Amanda coming in to, be by my side, and they're amazing at connecting with these young women and bringing the best out of them. So I think that definitely helped in all of that. But I mean, yeah, it was more excitement than anything, just ready to help change the program.
And then, obviously, you're saying goodbye to 4 seniors, or was it 5?
4.
4, okay,
yes.
So I was right the first time. So 4, you're obviously saying goodbye to 4 seniors. What were some great memories with those players, despite it only being your first year?
I mean, starting off with Taylor, it was just so fun to see her, lead this program as the quarterback, the setter of the team. We had a lot of great collaboration moments, and she really is like a coach on the court, and I really love that about her. Bella's just, I told her, I was like, Bella, I'm so corny for you, but you gonna love me one day. And she said, yes, coach, you're right. She was a hard one to crack, but she has just been such a phenomenal leader. I mean, I think the highlights with her is just the fun, corny moments that I have with her. And then Ayana, I mean, it was so fun to see her really grow into this position. And I told her my one goal for her at the end of this year is for her to believe in herself as much as I believe in her. And I think we got there. So, and then Miley, everything about her. I love her energy. I love her fight. I think she is the energy, believe, together, compete that we talk about. She is the epitome of that.
And then, obviously, it's a little too early to talk about next year, but what are you looking forward to going into next season?
Oh, man. I mean, the spring's going to be great. The spring is where you grow. The spring is where you solidify culture. It's where you dig into the fundamentals, next rep. Do it again. Let's do it again. Where you can really take that time to perfect things, so then we can get more into the strategy of it all, right? And so I'm excited for the spring and that. Recruiting's my thing. And so I'm excited for who we have coming in, and can't announce yet, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited for who we have coming in and just future players that I'm talking to and making connections with right now.
And then the last question. You were telling the girls to keep pushing on the court. Has that kind of been your MO this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the whole UCR athletics. Find a way. You just got to keep pushing. You got to keep fighting and pouring into each other. And it's amazing what we can do. It's amazing the runs we go on, the comebacks that we've had. When you just keep fighting, you just keep pushing. Like, you just never know what you're capable of. So, yeah, definitely.
So that was my post-game interview with Nicky Cannon, the UC Riverside women's volleyball head coach. Obviously, like she said, the wins and losses don't define a person, let alone a player or a team. The fact that this was her first season and she had upbeat energy throughout the entire season, let alone the whole match, shows the growth of UC Riverside and how UC Riverside made a great hire, and they can only go up from here. So I really hope that UC Riverside does continue to grow, and hopefully they do accomplish some goals. Obviously, it was a rough year, but like I said, they showed a lot of fight and some grit, and depending on what happens next season, with obviously a lot can happen. Maybe players will come and go. Maybe players will come to UC Riverside. Either way, it is going to be something to watch for, and I really think that the Highlanders can put it all together. Just like Long Beach, UC Riverside, Long Beach State also improved, and obviously Tyler Hildebrand attested to that in the post-game interview following the match. Now, I'm not going to go into that all that much, just because there were some emotions that not emotions, but there were some. There was a little emotion when it came to the following the match, and let's just say that one of the players, I'm not going to really say this all too much, but let's just say the emotions got a little better of her, but overall, he basically talked about the improvement of this program and how that this team basically showed growth over the season, and it showed in their record, and obviously it showed in the gameplay. Obviously, they were expected to finish 4th behind Cal Poly Santa Barbara and Hawaii, but tying for 3rd is not bad, especially since, here's my thing, if Long Beach State had beaten Oregon, it might have been a whole different story. If they also beat LMU at LMU, that also would have been a whole different perspective. Beating Oregon would have been a huge culture win right there. That could have been a season changer right there. Unfortunately, they fell just short to Oregon, and they had a few Big West matches that could have easily gone their way. The Fullerton loss was obviously a tough one. The loss at Hawaii, obviously that hurt them, which kind of ended their winning streak, let alone their Big West Conference title hopes. The loss to Santa Barbara, which Tyler told me that there weren't too many positives in that matchup. And obviously the loss to Hawaii at Long Beach, it obviously hurt. But again, there's no shame in losing to Hawaii just because they're that good of a program. And speaking of home wins and losses, Long Beach State only lost one game at home, which obviously that was to Hawaii. It just goes to show that Long Beach does pretty good at home. They just got to put it all together on the road. If they take care of their road woes, because they actually did finish with a record under 500 in terms of road games, I think this team could do some major damage. Obviously, I'm not just trying to say that as a homer, but I really think Tyler Hildebrand has the team heading in the right direction, and I really think that this team can do some damage going forward in the Big West Conference. Now, I've also been hearing murmurs, and Tyler kind of said this in some of his post-game and pre-week press conferences, saying that the Big West Conference should have a conference tournament, and I would like to see that. I think there should be a Big West Conference tournament. I mean, the men have it. Women's basketball and men's basketball have it. Why does women's volleyball not have it? That obviously could cut the number of non-conference games down, and it could cut the number of conference games down, but it is doable. Why not have a 6-team tournament or an 8-team tournament? It's definitely doable. There's 10 teams in the conference, or if not 11 teams, there's 11 teams. Either way, they could possibly, in reality, they could have a Big West Conference tournament. It's just pending approval from some of the other coaches. And yes, there are 11 teams in the conference tournament. And I guess that also another reason why there could be pending approval for a conference tournament is because UC San Diego, a team that transitioned from Division II, they had to basically have to wait on the transition rule, as it's a 4-year process, and once their 4-year process is over and done with, then they could partake in the NCAA tournament. So I presume that also has to be a factor right there as well. But I think a Big West Conference tournament would be beneficial. It would give other teams a chance, whereas only one team is going to be the automatic qualifier. I mean, Santa Barbara, they had their chances of winning the Big West Conference as a whole. Unfortunately, that loss to Davis set them back, and if they don't lose that one, and maybe if they don't lose the one to Long Beach State, it's a whole different season. Unfortunately, they needed a lot to happen in order for them to actually win the Big West Conference. And I know I'm going on a little bit of a tangent on the Big West, but for Santa Barbara, they needed to win out their games, and then they needed Hawaii to lose out, which would also include losing to Northridge. And Santa Barbara, to their credit, they really turned the corner come conference play. It's just that one loss to Davis hurt them. Also, yeah, it was a 5-setter. And then, again, this kind of goes back to winning on the road is very crucial. Because you could be the best team at home, but if you're not winning on the road, you're not really proving yourself. Because when it comes to NCAA tournament time, you're going to have to win in some of these hostile and loud and raucous gyms. So overall, it just goes to show that you need to be battle-tested on the road as well as at home, but time will tell. But back to the NCAA, or not NCAA, the Big West Conference tournament possibility, I think it would be a great idea. Maybe they could start small with like 6 teams and then expand it. Just because you look at the Big West Conference standings, Santa Barbara finished with 20 wins, Long Beach State 19 wins, Cal Poly 17 wins, UC Irvine 20 wins, and even Davis finished 500, 15-15. Those are all pretty gosh darn good teams. Even Fullerton and UC San Diego improved. It's just that, unfortunately, they don't get the chance to prove themselves. I'm thinking this. If the conference tournament champion... Tyler actually pitched this idea as well, that the Big West Conference could have 2 bids, one being the regular season champion and then one being the conference tournament champion. I don't know if that'll fly. I think one bid will be for either the NIVC. If the regular season champion wins the regular season but doesn't win the tournament, they automatically qualify for the NIVC. Whereas if they win both the conference tournament and the regular season conference championship, then it's possible that then the runner-up could probably be the NIVC recipient, if said team wants to participate in it. But overall, that's my little gist on the Big West Conference right there. If people that didn't want to listen to the Big West Conference didn't want to hear this, then you're more than welcome to fast forward this, but in advance, but there'll be timestamps posted following the live recording of this. But overall, that's pretty much that for the Big West right there. Now for my NCAA Women's Volleyball Team of the Week. So I had a lot of possible nominees, and I could only choose one, and I chose Pitt for the Team of the Week for Week 14. I'm going to be continuing Team of the Week as the NCAA tournament goes by. But Pitt really impressed me. I thought they really held their own. They really did a great job against Georgia Tech. Obviously, it was at home, but Georgia Tech did not give any rat's tails about it. And Pitt was coming off of a loss to Louisville. And I wouldn't say bad one, but they got swept big time. As Pitt basically, they needed to bounce back in a big way. And it took a little time for them to get their game going. They took the first set, dropped the next 2, won the 4th set, and then the 5th set was a 19-17 win for Pitt. And it was a thriller of a game. Like, that's why I picked Pitt as my NCAA Women's Volleyball Team of the Week for Week 14. In addition, they followed up the Georgia Tech win with a sweep against Boston College. Boston College is an improved team, so I kind of put that as a little X factor right there as well. Honorable mentions were Wisconsin for clinching the Big Ten with 4-set wins over Nebraska and Ohio State, like I mentioned. Minnesota for not only beating Ohio State in 4 at Ohio State, but for also sweeping Nebraska. I did not expect that. Minnesota really impressed me, and I really want to give them the honor, but Pitt winning the ACC was what truly mattered. Now, if Minnesota clinched a share of the Big Ten, I would have given them the honor, but they get honorable mention. Also, Creighton gets the Big East Creighton gets honorable mention for winning the Big East Conference as they won the championship match in 5 over Marquette. And then also I gave honorable mention to UCF as they clinched a share of the AAC title with a 5-set win over Houston. But this week, Pitt is deserving of the NCAA Women's Volleyball Team of the Week. So congratulations to the Panthers as they basically showed up and showed out this past week, and I was very impressed. They're still a very good team despite not having Kayla Lund. Obviously, she's doing bigger and better things, but remember, that team still has Serena Gray, Courtney Bazzario, Juliana Dalton, Rachel Fairbanks, and many other talented players on that team as well. So that's pretty much that for my team of the week right there. So unfortunately, before I get into the final AVCA Women's Volleyball Coaches Poll, this Monday, being today, this is basically Black Monday. So for those of you that don't know what Black Monday is all about, it's basically like the NFL where basically teams are going to be firing their coaches and making changes to their program. And obviously transfers, this actually opens the transfer portal for many players, whether in all divisions. So, for starters, in terms of the coaching changes, we obviously had Laura Bird-Kuhn of Texas A&M departing. So, there was that right there for her. Also in the SEC, we had Joshua Taylor of Missouri. So, my thing for Joshua Taylor is his team just didn't get off the ground this season and last season. Missouri obviously showed some flashes, but they just did not have the team that they had back in 2019 as well as 2021. Like, they just did not have, or I'm sorry, not 2021, 2020, the COVID season, but they just did not have the players like Kylie DeBerg back when they had her final year. So, I understand why Joshua Taylor got canned, but it wasn't all his fault. It was mostly because his team just could not keep up with the rest of the SEC, and the wins and the losses piled up, and Missouri just said, "We've had enough of you." And they knew they were in for a rebuild once Kylie DeBerg graduated and transferred over to LSU. So it sucks that Joshua Taylor got the boot, but it is what it is. And the thing about being a coach is winning cures everything, but losing just does not help your case. And for Joshua Taylor, back-to-back not-so-good seasons did not help, and now Missouri is off looking for a new head coach. Also, jumping over to the, not staying in the SEC, Caleb Banwarth actually just stepped down as head coach, as she actually was notified. She actually got the boot. It was the day after Ole Miss took Florida to 5. So Caleb Banwarth of Ole Miss is unfortunately gone as head coach. Bree Henry is currently acting as the head coach, but the news hasn't been released on the team website. The news was actually released courtesy of Lincoln Arneal, basically this reporter that reports on all things Lincoln volleyball. So he reported that Kayla Banwarth is out as Ole Miss's head coach, according to the Northeast Mississippi Daily Journal. She went 29-38 in 2.5 seasons, and they made the NCAA tournament last year. Bree Henry is a graduate assistant from Nebraska. She will be acting as the head coach. And this quote here says, "I thank Keith Carter and Lynette Johnson for the opportunity to coach at Ole Miss," Banwarth said in a statement. "I am grateful to the student athletes for allowing me to be a part of their volleyball careers. Coaching volleyball is my greatest passion. I will continue to pursue that passion when the right opportunity arises. I am excited to see what the next chapter has in store for me and my family." So, obviously, Ole Miss went from making the NCAA tournament to missing out. Obviously, it wasn't Ole Miss's year this season, but I wonder what could have happened if Ole Miss beat Florida. Would her job be saved? That's going to be a question that will never, ever, 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 ever get answered. And then the last firing from this past week happens to go to the Big 12 Conference as Susie Fritz of Kansas State is out. Keep in mind that Susie Fritz actually coached at Kansas State for 22 years, and she's the all-time winningest volleyball coach at K-State, and she guided K-State to 13 NCAA tournaments as a head coach and 17 overall within the program. So for her to be out after this season is kind of surprising. I know K-State, Kansas State did not have the biggest and best season, but for her to be out after 22 years and being the all-time winningest coach, that's a little bit of a surprise right there. So I feel this, again, this obviously you want success within your program and you want to see winning and you obviously want to see like growth within the program. But again, they play in the Big 12. You're playing Texas and Baylor and Iowa State, which is on the rise. And then Oklahoma is probably going to get better. And TCU was impressive this season. So for K-State, and Kansas. Can't forget about Kansas. Kansas is also good as well. But for Kansas State and them firing Susie Fritz, it just is a little mind-boggling right there. So unfortunately for Susie Fritz, she was given her walking papers. So sadly, we won't be seeing any more of her, but I wish her the best going forward, and hopefully she turns around another program like she did with K-State. And that's pretty much that for all the firings. In terms of like coaches stepping away, Minnesota and Colorado State have their coaches stepping away. I already talked about Hugh McCutcheon and how he is basically stepping away. I was not informed of Colorado State, and sadly I did not include that in my notes, but I do wish them the best going forward with whatever their future endeavors are. And then jumping on over to the AVCA transfer portal. So the transfer portal is open, and we have a few transfers already in there. We have Eva Wheeler, a sophomore setter from Georgia State, entering the transfer portal. Then we have Janasia Carr, an opposite/middle, who is a senior from Alaska Fairbanks. Then we have Crystal Galaviz, an outsider/opposite, who's a sophomore, transferring from Georgia State as well. Then we have Jordan Flowers, a redshirt sophomore, opposite/middle, transferring from Bethune Cookman. And this was the biggest transfer for this week, or for today. Anna Dodson of UCLA transferring from UCLA. This is big time right there, because she was kind of the big time hitter and kind of the successor for what's-her-face, Mac May, even though the two play totally different positions. But this is big time news right there. Like, I did not expect her to be in the transfer portal. Currently, she is a graduate student, so I think she's going to be a graduate student next season. So she's obviously got one more year due to the COVID year. So I imagine she's going to be finding out where she's going to be finding a new home. And I feel this isn't because she wants out of there, but it's because that she already used up her 4 years at UCLA, and maybe she wants to go elsewhere, kind of like with what Callie Schwarzenbach did with Nebraska and Long Beach State. But overall, whichever team does land Anna Dodson, that team is going to be extremely fortunate, and I feel that team is going to hit the jackpot in terms of the transfer portal. So that is that for the transfer portal right there. There's going to be a lot of transfers to come, as this is basically going to be a weekly thing, unless, of course, there's not going to be any transfers. So let us move on to the final coaches poll of the Division I Division I women's volleyball coaches poll. So this is basically the final coaches poll. Keep in mind, I'm not going to do a full breakdown of this. I'm just going to be going over the list and basically going to be recapping all the teams that are currently ranked. So 25 through 21 consists of Washington at 25, Washington State at 24, Houston at 23, Western Kentucky at 22, and UCF at 21. 20 through 16 consists of Rice at 20, Purdue at 19, BYU at 18, Baylor at 16, and Baylor at 17 and Marquette at 16. Sorry, a little bit of a hiccup there. 15 through 11 consists of Kentucky at 15, Creighton at 14, Georgia Tech at 13, Florida at 12, and Penn State at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Ohio State at 10, Oregon at 9, Minnesota at 8, Nebraska at 7, and Pitt at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Stanford at 5, Louisville at 4, San Diego at 3, Wisconsin at 2, and your number 1 team in the final AVCA Division I coaches poll in the regular season is Texas. That's basically your coaches poll for the regular season, the final one of the regular season of November 28th. We will take a little bit of a commercial break. When we come back, we got the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament to go over. So keep it locked here. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always want to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows. It's not just Set Point that is live and that is the only show on IE Sports Radio. We have other shows like you heard in the drops. You have the show that never sleeps with Pierre Moss and Harrison Glazer, Sin City Sports with Cale Henderson, and Chi-Town Weekly with Adam Karnick. Chi-Town Weekly actually comes on an hour before this show goes live, so definitely check out all of our shows at IE Sports Radio. Also check out the blog. We have blog posts from Patty Bax, Aaron X, Mike Patton himself, and soon to be myself, as I'll be blogging about Long Beach State and its women's volleyball team and what I learned from covering Long Beach State's women's volleyball team this year. But with all that said and done, let's get on into segment number 2. And this is probably going to be the last one. So it's the NCAA tournament. So the NCAA women's volleyball tournament is finally here, as we basically have our teams locked in. So we're just going to go through the entire bracket, going from upper left all the way down to bottom right. So we'll go upper left, then lower left, then upper right, then lower right. So we'll start off with the upper right. So the number 1 overall seed in this little region is Texas. So basically Texas has home court advantage throughout the entirety of the first 3 rounds, or not first 3 rounds, the first 4 rounds, the round of 64, round of 32, round of 16, and the quarterfinals. And then once the semifinals hit, then that's where it's going to shift on over to Omaha. So Texas will have the honor of playing Farley Dickinson in the first round. So Farley Dickinson is a team from Jersey. They won their conference, and they're representing New Jersey. So good on Farley Dickinson for making the NCAA tournament, and honestly, good job for them, as this is actually their first ever appearance in the NCAA women's volleyball tournament. So that's amazing that they made the NCAA tournament right there. So below them is Georgia versus Towson. So Towson was the amazing team that managed to have a perfect season until they lost to Elon in the CAA conference play. So yeah, I think it's the CAA. I think it's the CCA. Either way, they lost to Elon in conference play. That's their only loss of the season. Other than that, Towson has not lost a match ever since. And they actually won their conference tournament as well. They played Georgia, which made the NCAA tournament. So Georgia had their up and down season, like most Georgia sports do. I'm just kidding. So Georgia, they weren't bad in the SEC, but they were certainly no Kentucky or Florida. So for Georgia, I had a feeling they'd get in just because the SEC actually has quite a number of teams in this tournament, so that's going to be for a little bit later. Below Georgia and Towson, we have Georgia Tech and Wright State. So Wright State has kind of been the more interesting team. They won their conference, and their libero is actually top 3 overall all-time in NCAA digs, as basically she has been a vacuum cleaner when it comes to getting digs for her team, but they face a very tough challenge in Georgia Tech. That is going to be tough, taking on Julia Bergman and all those other hitters. So I really think Wright State's going to have their work cut out for them, but we'll see what happens with them. Below Georgia Tech and Wright State is Ball State and Marquette. So Ball State lost in the MAC tournament finals, but they did manage to sneak their way into the NCAA tournament. They're actually one of the last 4 teams to make it in, as they drew Marquette, which was the 4 seed. That's a tough matchup right there, just because Marquette, obviously, they've been somewhat battle-tested. They obviously had their ups and downs. They beat Kentucky early on, and then they had a few bumps in the road. They lost to Creighton, but they haven't had too many bad losses here and there. They also played Wisconsin tough, but ultimately fell to them. So for Marquette, this is going to be an uphill climb for Ball State. Below Ball State and Marquette is Ohio State and Tennessee State. So Tennessee State, let me just tell you, Tennessee State is actually one of 3 HBCU teams in there, along with Delaware State and Florida A&M. So for those of you, there's your little history lesson right there. HBCUs is alive and well when it comes to this NCAA women's volleyball tournament, and don't you forget about it. Ahem. Anyway, so they drew Ohio State, which is a tough little matchup right there, and honestly, Ohio State has not been playing well. I'm not going to say that Tennessee State's going to win this one, but Ohio State has been very off. Ever since they beat Nebraska, they have not looked like the same team. I'm not sure if I jinxed them when I gave him the NCAA Women's Volleyball Team of the Week honor, but they've lost 4 in a row. They lost to Maryland, and they lost to Indiana. Spoiler alert, both those teams didn't make the tournament. And then they also lost to Minnesota and Wisconsin. So for Ohio State, they're going to have to start playing better. There's no other way to say it. They have too many talented players, and they were too battle-tested to basically be this shoddy. Below Ohio State and Tennessee State is High Point versus USC. So High Point repeated as conference champion as they face USC. Now USC's been a little up and down lately. USC, in my opinion, I think they have potential, but they only go as far as Skylar Fields takes them. I also did not see Mia Tuaniga playing in the matchup. The matchup against UCLA, which Adania Fa'umuina was able to take over as setter, but I kind of wonder what's happened with Mia Tuaniga. I hope it's not anything serious and it's not a big bad injury, but we'll see what happens. If USC does get out of that first round, and so does Ohio State, they could be in an interesting position when they play Ohio State. But they have to get past High Point. And High Point's actually a fairly good team. Like they're not to be underestimated. Remember, High Point, I think a couple seasons ago, they managed to upend UCF, which I don't think anyone had on their bingo card, but I digress. Below High Point and USC is Florida State and Northern Iowa. So Northern Iowa won its conference, while Florida State, they had their ups and downs. They didn't have a big breakout win, but they didn't have too many bad losses. They had some competitive losses. They got reverse swept against Georgia Tech. They lost in 5 to Creighton, which they probably could have won. And I think that was the match where they had over 100 digs. And then they've lost to a few teams here and there. I have heard that this Florida State team is the most talented it's been in its coach's tenure. But I really think Florida State has left a lot of meat on the bone when it came to their season. I think Florida State is due for maybe a big-time win. Do I see it happening? Maybe, but I wouldn't hold my breath on it. Below Florida State and Northern Iowa, to close out the first corner of the NCAA tournament, or the first portion of the bracket, is Southeastern Louisiana versus Minnesota. So Southeastern Louisiana is a first-timer of the NCAA tournament. They won their conference tournament, and this is their first ever appearance. They drew Minnesota, which actually is playing some of their best volleyball as of late. I think Minnesota, with a lot of talent on that team with Taylor Landfair and the Wucherer girls, I think that's going to be a tough matchup for Southeastern Louisiana. But you never know with this NCAA tournament. It is going to be tough just because Minnesota is hosting. They have home court advantage behind Texas. They'll have home court advantage unless they play Texas in the regional finals, which that's obviously going to be Bad News Bears, or in this case, Bad News Gophers. But this is the last hurrah for Hugh McCutcheon. After this, he's done, and he's taking on a big athletic director position for Minnesota. So I would not be surprised to see Minnesota fight for their coach. So don't be too surprised to see if they manage to pull off some sort of late little run. And don't underestimate them as well. Don't be like me, who thought they were going to lose in the round of 32. Oh, I still can't believe I thought that Minnesota was going to lose in the round of 32 to Stanford. Good times, y'all. Okay, but that's going to do it for the upper left portion of the NCAA women's volleyball bracket. Jumping down to the lower left portion of the NCAA bracket, we have San Diego. We'll start with Stanford being the number 1 seed. So Stanford was the number 1 seed, and I guess it's a perfect segue to go into San Diego barely missing out on the number 1 seed. The committee, according to the selection show, they said that San Diego barely missed out. They were inches away. If Stanford probably lost to USC, I think San Diego is a number 1 seed, and Stanford has to go through San Diego. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Stanford's RPI was very high, by the way. Like, Stanford's RPI blew San Diego's out of the water, and it did not help that San Diego played in the West Coast Conference, which had a few teams where they just blew by them. Like, the only team that, of all the sweeps they had in the West Coast Conference, BYU was the only notable and impressive sweep of San Diego's. Every other sweep that they had in the West Coast Conference was complete dog water. Like, I'm not trying to knock those teams, but San Diego just has a very talented team, and they were not getting challenged by any way, shape, and form. The only time San Diego got challenged was against LMU, which went 5 with both of them. Then Pepperdine took them to 4 both times, and then BYU took San Diego to 4 in the regular season finale. For San Diego, they actually are the number 2 seed, as we're going to go top from bottom of this little portion of the bracket. San Diego is the 2 seed. They will play Northern Colorado. San Diego will have home court advantage up until the regional final, when they would have to take on big, bad, scary Stanford. So for San Diego, here's my thing for them. They have a lot of talent on that team. Now it's all about putting it all together. Will they become the Los Angeles Rams of this season, or of the Los Angeles Rams of last year, or will they become the Denver Broncos of this tournament? Basically, that analogy is the Rams had so many pieces that they acquired, and they wound up winning the Super Bowl. The Broncos of this year, that analogy is basically having a lot of talented key pieces and just underachieving the rest of the way. Below San Diego and Northern Colorado is UNLV and Washington State. So this is a very tricky matchup. This is probably my matchup of the first round. UNLV Washington State is a great matchup just because UNLV, here's the thing, they finished first in their conference in the regular season, right? But then, and they also got a first round bye to the semifinals of their conference tournament. Unfortunately for the Rebels, they wound up losing in the semifinals to the eventual champion Utah State. However, they got into the NCAA tournament just because UNLV's overall RPI and strength of schedule, and they don't have too many bad losses. It really impressed everybody. So UNLV plays Washington State, and this is a Washington State team that I think can pull off an upset or two. I really think the Cougars are talented, and they finished 3rd in the Pac-12. That is no joke. They finished only behind Oregon, which they beat, and then they finished behind Stanford, which they took them to 4 the first time. First and only time, by the way. And for me, I think Washington State does have potential in this portion of the bracket. I would not be surprised if they got to the Sweet 16. I know San Diego is talented, but I will not be surprised if Washington State goes on further past the round of 32. And my thing for Washington State is that their future looks bright for next year because they have 5 of their seniors coming back next year, which is going to be very impressive. But we're talking about this year. Below UNLV and Washington State is Western Kentucky and Bowling Green. So Western Kentucky, they finished runner-up in their conference tournament in the Conference USA tournament behind Rice, as Western Kentucky will be hosting Bowling Green in the first round. Bowling Green won the MAC tournament. So for Western Kentucky, this is their chance to get up off the mat and get a little revenge from their loss to Rice. In order to do, but Bowling Green won't be the easiest of opponents. Bowling Green is actually fairly decent, and for them to win the MAC tournament as the 2 seed, it's quite impressive. So I don't think this first round matchup is going to be as easy as Western Kentucky thinks it's going to be. Below Western Kentucky and Bowling Green is Loyola of Chicago and Kentucky. Loyola of Chicago won its conference as they play Kentucky, the co-conference champion from the SEC. So for Kentucky, here's my thing. Kentucky has not been bad, but they haven't been overly impressive. They don't have the big standout wins that they've had in years past. Obviously, they've had a lot of roster turnover, but this year's roster is very resilient, to say the least. They've won the SEC 6 years in a row. Can they take out an upstart Loyola of Chicago team? I also got to make note that Loyola of Chicago is the only team from Illinois that's in the NCAA tournament. Northwestern didn't make it. Illinois didn't make it. No one else from Chicago made it. So Loyola of Chicago is going to need Sister Jean to give them some luck against Kentucky, especially since Kentucky is going to be very good. Below Loyola of Chicago and Kentucky is Creighton versus Auburn. So Auburn was another last four team in, as here's my thing. Auburn has quantity wins, but not quality wins. They started the season off 13-0, and everyone was like, wow, Auburn's looking really good. I look at their schedule, and I'm like, on what part of their schedule is their 13-game winning streak actually good? None of their 13 wins in that 13-0 start was overly impressive. As a result, they eventually got exposed. They lost to some of the other better teams like Kentucky, Florida, Arkansas. Missouri handed them a loss, though they did beat Tennessee and they beat Georgia twice. But overall, I don't mean to say this in a negative way to Auburn, but they're not the team that I would think would make the NCAA tournament. Now, if they upset Creighton, which won the Big East Conference Championship, I will gladly eat my crow, and I will own up to what I said. But for me, Auburn just is not it. I think Creighton should win this one fairly easy. And knowing my luck, now Creighton's going to lose, like they did back last season to Kansas. Who knows? Maybe Auburn could be the Kansas of last year. Below Creighton and Auburn, we have South Dakota and Houston. So Houston shared the conference title with UCF as they play South Dakota, which is the Summit League representative. So South Dakota, here's my thing. South Dakota is a very good team within their conference. Outside of their conference, they don't have too many standoutish wins. I think they're a good team, yes. Do I think they're good enough to take down Houston? That remains to be seen. Like, it really does. But I don't think South Dakota is as bad as most people think they are. I think South Dakota is a little underrated. It should be a fun little matchup. Below South Dakota and Houston is Hawaii and LSU. So Hawaii, I know this team all too well. Hawaii is definitely good. They had a little bit of a bumpy start just because their non-conference schedule was kind of challenging. They split with USC. They lost a heartbreaker to UCLA, which they should not have lost. No offense, UCLA. But once conference play hit, they were a whole different team. And once they play at Stan Sheriff Center, you cannot stop that team that easily. Here's my thing. They are the 8th seed of this portion of the bracket. This is not ideal for them because unless, of course, Stanford loses, which I'll be getting into in a little bit, they're gonna have to prove they can win not at Stan Sheriff Center. Now, Hawaii has had a lot of success, but most of the teams that they've beaten aren't really that great in terms of road opponents. The only true standoutish win that I think they have on the road is UC Santa Barbara, which they needed 5 to beat them. But other than that, I think Hawaii can be sneaky good, but they play LSU, and LSU was battle-tested. I feel Hawaii is still going to win that one. I feel Hawaii has what it takes to take down the Tigers of LSU. LSU, they started off really good. They beat Kentucky, and they also beat Arkansas, both of which were ranked. But then they kind of fizzled out. But they made the NCAA tournament. And I think that LSU does present somewhat of a challenge, but who's going to be stopping Riley Wagner? That's my biggest thing. And if you do stop Riley Wagner, are you going to stop Amber Igide and all those other big time hitters on Hawaii? I really think beating Hawaii at Hawaii is going to be much easier said than done for LSU. But if they do get past Hawaii, then waiting below them is Stanford. Perfect segue to go into the final matchup of the bottom left-hand corner. We have Pepperdine at Stanford. So Stanford obviously is the number 1 seed. I already talked about them. Dominated the Pac-12 for the most part. Their only loss came at the hands of Oregon, which they only played once. Outside of that, they had a few close calls with Stanford or with UCLA and USC, which I still can't believe that USC whiffed a 2-0 lead. So their opponent, Pepperdine has been through a lot this season. So obviously they had the big-time wins against Baylor, Washington, and Minnesota. Keep in mind they also beat Washington and Minnesota on the road. But West Coast Conference wasn't really overly kind to them. They lost both times to LMU, their PCH Cup rival, and then they also lost to the other two-headed monster in San Diego and BYU. Those losses do not amount to the loss of losing Rachel Ahrens as she quit, or she stepped away from the sport just because she doesn't quit, but she stepped away from the sport of volleyball just because of mental health, and I only wish she could have stayed on the team, but you do got to take care of your mentals, and Marshawn Lynch said it best, take care of y'all mentals and chickens. So for Pepperdine, this is going to be an uphill battle, but they do have other talented players. They have Meg Brown. Emily Helmuth has been a great surprise, being only a freshman. She was named the West Coast Conference Freshman of the Year. Also, Grace Chillingworth has been quite the surprise at outside here. She's done wonders taking over for what's-her-face, Rachel Ahrens. And overall, it's going to be a tough challenge for Pepperdine, but one thing you also got to remember, their assistant coach, Steve Astor, used to be a volunteer assistant coach or a graduate assistant coach for Washington, so he knows quite a bit about Stanford, albeit it was only for one season, which was the year that Stanford repeated as champions, but you never know. And also, Astor knows all about Kendall Kipp of Stanford, as Astor coached Kipp back in high school, for those that don't know. So keep an eye on that one. I'm not going to say Stanford's going to lose that one. I definitely think Stanford's going to win that one, but you never know with what Pepperdine has in store. Like, maybe they've turned a corner. Who knows? So that is that for the lower left-hand bracket of the NCAA tournament. Jumping over to the upper right-hand bracket, we have Wisconsin as the number 1 seed, as they will play Quinnipiac. Or Quinnipiac. I don't know how it's pronounced. I'm just going to call it Quinnipiac. So, Quinnipiac is actually a first-time team of the NCAA tournament. Welcome to the NCAA tournament. Congratulations on making it. Unfortunately, they have the unfortunate honor of facing Wisconsin. That is a tough matchup as on its own, because Wisconsin is the reigning NCAA champion. Here's the thing. Quinnipiac has nothing left to lose, and they're facing Wisconsin, which has home court advantage all the way up to the regional final. It's going to be tough, but you never know what could happen. I got Wisconsin winning, though. Below Wisconsin and Quinnipiac is TCU and Washington. So TCU, here's my thing for TCU. They actually played quite impressive. They beat Baylor in the Big 12 and Big 12 conference play. They looked very good for the most part. And for them to finish in, the top 4 of the conference is rather impressive, especially when you're facing Texas and Baylor and Iowa State on the rise and all those other teams. Washington, on the other hand, they were awarded the 8th seed of the tournament. Here's my thing. Washington has kind of been an up-and-down team. They finished the season with wins over USC, which is pretty decent, though USC was kind of going up and down themselves. And then they lost to Washington State at Washington State. So this could be TCU's time to shine, but Washington also struggled as they don't have Maddie Ensley on their team. She's out for the remainder of the season. And they did lose to Arizona State and Arizona in Pac-12 play, so I don't know. This one's kind of an iffy one. I feel Washington on paper, Washington should win this one, but you never know with TCU. I think TCU is just as good. Below TCU and Washington is UCF and Yale. So Yale won the Ivy League tournament, and then UCF tied for first with Houston in the AAC. So Yale has kind of been Now they have to play a tough team in UCF. UCF has been a perennial team in the NCAA tournament. Yale has been somewhat perennial, with them and Princeton pretty much sharing opportunities to be in the NCAA tournament. For UCF, McKenna Millville is a human wrecking ball. If Yale wants to win this matchup, they have to slow down McKenna Millville. Below UCF and Yale is UMBC and Penn State. So everyone thought that Penn State, which has made every NCAA tournament known to women in the NCAA women's volleyball side of things, everyone thought that Penn State was going to be a little bit down. Not quite. They really, really impressed me this season. They have labels of young, inexperienced, first-year head coach and Katie Schumacher-Cawley, but they somewhat exceeded expectations. They have quite a good number of wins. They took Wisconsin to 5. They beat Minnesota. I think Penn State is a dark horse to make it out of this. If it is going to be tricky to take down Wisconsin at Wisconsin, but they also got to get past UCF. So Penn State is the 4th seed. They will have home court advantage up until they face Wisconsin, if they get up there, all the way up to the round of 16. But for me, Penn State, I feel Penn State has what it takes to at least get past the first 2 rounds. First round for sure. Like, they're not going to lose in the first round. This isn't going to be any sort of shortage of they're going to find a way to slip up. Like, Penn State is just too good. UMBC, they won their conference, but I just think Penn State is going to be too strong for them. Below UMBC and Penn State is Florida and Florida A&M. You got to love these interstate rivalries. Though I don't know if Florida A&M is going to be considered a rival. So Florida A&M is the last HBCU that made the NCAA tournament. They do have the honor of facing Florida, and that's going to be a real uphill climb. You know, Florida, they're young. They only have 2 seniors, but Marina Markova is very good. And Alexis Stuckey is a freshman phenom at the setter position. And then they got Merritt Beeson as well, who has been wonders for the Florida offense. So it's going to be tough sledding for Florida A&M. But if they do get past Florida, then that would be quite something. Below Florida and Florida A&M is Florida Gulf Coast and Iowa State. So Iowa State being the little engine that beat Texas, they were able to they now have the honor of facing Florida Gulf Coast. Sorry. They have the honor of playing Florida Gulf Coast, which was kind of, what's the word? I wouldn't say the media darling, but it was kind of the other little engine that could from last year. Last year, Florida Gulf Coast beat Texas Tech via a reverse sweep. But now let's see if Florida Gulf Coast can take down this Iowa State team that beat the number 1 team in the nation on its home floor. So you got to remember that Iowa State is the 6th seed. They will be hosting this matchup. I want to see Florida Gulf Coast pull it off, but I just think Iowa State's just too good. But who's to know? Like, maybe we get an upset here and there. Below Florida Gulf Coast and Iowa State is BYU and James Madison. So BYU obviously did not have the season that most people thought they were going to have. A little bit of a down year for the Cougars, but they were awarded the 7th seed as they played James Madison, the team that won the Sun Belt Conference in its first year, mind you. So impressive stuff from James Madison as they were able to beat Texas State in the final. For James Madison, I really think that they do have a good shot at beating BYU, but it's going to be tough winning at BYU. That's not an easy place to win at. So for James Madison, they got to slow down the momentum and tempo from BYU. But I don't know. I give the Jimmies a good little chance, but I think BYU might have a little bit more in the tank. But we'll see. Remember, BYU has been battle-tested, and like I said all the way early in the year, BYU is well known for winning at home, but can they win on the road? Like, they go as far as their top players can take them. But for me, I think BYU should win this one on paper. And then the last matchup in the upper right-hand corner of the NCAA women's volleyball bracket is Colgate at Pitt. Pitt being the co-ACC champion, I really think that they might be just as good as last year's team. I really think that Pitt does have the potential of going deep in this tournament. Now, I'm not trying to crown them already, but I really think Pitt has a lot of talent on their roster. And against Colgate, I don't want to say that Colgate's going to get demolished, but Pitt just has so many options. Like, they have a very talented setter/hitter in Rachel Fairbanks. Courtney Abazario is a monster on the right side. Serena Gray is great at middle, as well as the Chiamaka girl. And then also you have Juliana Dalton, who's been dynamite at outside. I really think that Pitt could go deep. I want to say that Pitt can go at least to the Elite Eight. I'm not trying to jinx them in any way, shape, and form, but I really think Pitt is just that good. And if we get Wisconsin-Pitt in the regional final, that's going to be fun times. So that is that for the top right-hand bracket of the NCAA Women's Volleyball bracket. Now to conclude, we have the lower right-hand bracket. So the number one seed in the lower right-hand bracket is Louisville. So unfortunately, Nebraska was unable to get it just because that loss to Minnesota and Wisconsin kind of derailed their hopes. Louisville, obviously the co-ACC champion. I'll get into them in a little bit, but going from up through down, we have number 2 Nebraska is the number 2 seed, taking on Delaware State. So Delaware State is... Oh, I'm sorry. They're also one of the other 3 HBCUs. So it's Tennessee State, Florida A&M, and Delaware State. So my apologies. So it wasn't Farley Dickinson. That's the HBCU school. By the way, shout out to Pierre Moss for letting me know about that. But Delaware State is playing Nebraska. That's going to be a tough matchup playing at Duvaney. I think I was told that Nebraska has already sold out its tickets. So for Nebraska, this is kind of the last week of the season. I don't think is indicative of who they are. They've been good for the most part. Unfortunately, they just had the loss to Wisconsin, and that loss to Minnesota just really boggled my mind. And some people are saying that this team is not going to go deep. I think it can still go deep, just because you never want to underestimate Nebraska. Because remember, Nebraska was a 10th seed, and they wound up going all the way to the final and losing to Wisconsin. They won't face Wisconsin come the NCAA championship, but they could meet Wisconsin in the Final Four if the two manage to get far right there and then. But for right now, Nebraska, they played Minnesota close, but unfortunately Minnesota was able to pull out the set wins. But for Nebraska, I think that loss might have been the best thing for them. I think they got the bad loss out of the way. Now they just got to move forward and flush it down the toilet. Excuse me. Another little hiccup right there. Below Nebraska and Delaware State, we have Kansas and Miami. This is an underrated matchup if I've ever seen one. Kansas obviously had their up and down season in the Big 12. They almost upset Texas, just could not pull it out. They get the honor of playing Miami of Florida, or just the U. So for me, Kansas, I really want to pick Kansas for this one, but Miami did have that win over Georgia Tech. So I really want to see Kansas pull out the win, but I don't know. I think Kansas might have, if they still had that Anna girl, Anna McDonald, I think it was. I think Kansas might actually pull out this win, but they don't really have her. But so we'll see what happens. I think Kansas could keep up with Miami, but I don't know. I think this one's a pick-em if you ask me. Either way, that's Kansas and Miami. Below Kansas and Miami is Arkansas versus Utah State. So Utah State is the other little engine that won the Mountain West Conference Championship as they play Arkansas. So Arkansas has had its fair share of ups and downs. They were really good as they upset Georgia Tech and they beat Washington in non-conference play. And then they kind of fell a little downward as they just had their fair share of losses. And they didn't really have the true big-time wins that everyone thought they would have in SEC play. But they're not bad by any means. I think for Arkansas, they're I think they're still just as good. And yes, they finished 4th behind Georgia, but I really think that Arkansas can play its best volleyball come the NCAA tournament. Do I think they can go deep? That still remains to be seen. But then playing Utah State, on paper it should be a win for Arkansas. I don't think they will play down to Utah State's level. Don't be surprised if Utah State does its little engine that could impersonation and beats Arkansas, though. I think Arkansas is a little 50-50, but I got Arkansas winning this one. Below Arkansas and Utah State is Oregon versus LMU. LMU obviously was another little engine that could, as they didn't have the biggest wins, but they did have some competitive matchups. Like they played Nebraska, they played Kansas, they took San Diego to 5 both times, they beat Pepperdine both times, they took a set off of BYU. I really think LMU definitely deserves to be in the NCAA tournament, but they have to play an interesting team in Oregon. So Oregon is definitely good. They've had to go 5 a number of times, and I would not be surprised if LMU took Oregon to 5. Here's the thing. LMU is not playing Oregon at LMU. They're playing them at Matthew Knight Arena in Oregon. So, unfortunately, LMU is going to have they're going to have their work cut out for them a little bit, but I really think that it's going to be a competitive matchup. Oregon has been on a tear. They have been hot as of late in terms of winning its matchups. I think their last loss came at the hands of said Washington State team. Their last loss did come at the hands of Washington State when they had that week where they lost to Washington and Washington State. So I think Oregon is playing a whole lot better. Brooke Nuneviller is definitely good. Mimi Collier is outstanding, as always. I would not be surprised if she or Elia Rubin of Stanford were named co-freshman of the year in the Pac-12. But it's going to be quite interesting to see this matchup. And I think it could be I don't think it's going to be a sweep as most people think it might be. This is definitely going to test Oregon, that's for sure. Below LMU and Oregon is Baylor and Stephen F. Austin. So for Baylor, there's no better way to put this. They finished second in the Big 12, which is great. Now they face Stephen F. Austin, which I think Baylor can win this one fairly easy. The good thing for Stephen F. Austin is that they don't have to go out of the state. The bad thing is that they're playing a Baylor team which has beaten Wisconsin, but that was earlier in the year, so I don't know if we can really count that win, just because Wisconsin's playing so much better than it was back in the early infancy stages of the season, let alone Big Ten conference play. So for Baylor, I think on paper they should win. They have the McGee girls, they have Lauren Harrison, they have Riley Simpson. I really think that Baylor should be able to win this one. They just can't play down to Stephen F. Austin's competition. They can't look ahead. Obviously, it would be nice to host a round of 32 matchup, but it won't happen if you look ahead and you don't take care of your stuff. So that is that for Baylor and Stephen F. Austin. Below them is Colorado and Rice. So Rice gets to host, but to an extent. Rice is a 5 seed, which is not really the best thing for them, as basically they have to take on Colorado, which that might be the worst thing for them. Colorado is a sneaky good team. That Colorado team that is in the Pac-12, they're not a bad team by any means. Like, everyone knocks the Pac-12 just because it's not the greatest. It's not the greatest in terms of women's volleyball, but Colorado finishing 5th is not all that bad. They finished okay. They tied for 5th. Tied for 5th with Washington. But overall, I think Colorado has been playing some decent volleyball. I don't think they're playing bad as of late. And finishing 20-10 is not that terrible. I really think that Colorado has been playing decent, and they beat Utah both times, which I think that's rather impressive if you ask me. They almost beat Oregon, but unfortunately that it wasn't meant to be. They beat Washington via sweep. So I really think this one's going to be an interesting matchup between the Buffs and the Owls. I think on paper Rice could win this one, But honestly, don't be surprised if Baylor pulls off the win. I think Baylor has, or not Baylor, Rice pulls off the win over Colorado. I think Rice definitely has what it takes, and I really think Rice, coming off that Conference USA Championship win, it definitely will help them. It definitely will help them in terms of their confidence and their momentum. Below Colorado and Rice is Purdue and Tennessee. So Purdue, they're a young team, and they had a lot of success early on. But then as Big Ten Conference play went on, they kind of deteriorated. I wouldn't say deteriorated, actually. I would just say that they kind of wilted along the way. So they do draw Tennessee, which is a rematch from earlier in the season. Tennessee does have some really talented players like Morgan Fingal and Erica Lovett. But can they beat Purdue? I think Purdue is going to be quite the tough task for the Lady Vols. I don't think it's impossible for them to win. I just think that it's going to be a little bit more of a climb to beat a team like Purdue, which has been battle-tested all over the place. And playing at Louisville, the whole thing is going to be at Louisville. It's going to be quite interesting, to say the least. And being on Louisville's side of the bracket, they're actually not going to play. So I made a mistake that the certain seeded teams are not going to be playing against one another. As for example, if you're a 7 seed, you're not going to host and all that sort of jazz. So for me, I really think that this is going to be quite interesting for Purdue and Tennessee. It's tough to beat a team 2 times in one season, especially when you don't play them on a weekly basis. It's not like the last time Tennessee and Purdue played one another, that was all the way back in the early stages of the regular season. Now we're going to see if said Purdue team is as good as they were back then. Just because Purdue, to me, I think they kind of deteriorated, in my opinion. And I feel that they're not as good as I thought they were. I thought Purdue was going to be a whole lot better, but Purdue is young. I really think Purdue is going to be, I wouldn't say exposed, but I really think that Tennessee has a boxer's chance of winning. I really think that they have a good shot at possibly pulling off the upset. I'm not trying to say Purdue is going to lose, but you get what I mean. And then the last matchup of the whole NCAA tournament bracket. By the way, let me just confirm, 3 seeds, 2 seeds, 4 seeds, and 1 seeds all host in the NCAA tournament to an extent. Like, the 1 seeds will get home court advantage all throughout the regional portion of the tournament, up until the Elite 8. And then once the Final Four arrives, it shifts over to Omaha, Nebraska. Sorry, a little bit of something kind of flew in my ear. But the last matchup of the NCAA tournament is Samford and Louisville, right below Purdue and Tennessee. So Louisville, they have Anna DeBeer back. Claire Chaussee is doing her thing. Louisville is definitely, obviously they were disappointed from last year. They were undefeated. They looked like they were going to be they were probably going to be the first undefeated team since, I think, Long Beach State? Or was it Penn State? Either way, I think it was Penn State from back in the Russ Rose days. But for Louisville, they're obviously disappointed at last year's tournament run where they fell in the semifinals. They're obviously not going to replicate last year's team. They can't really replicate last year's team. But for them, they obviously are out for a little redemption. I really think that the Cardinals are a huge threat to anyone. My thing is, they can't look too forward down the road. They obviously cannot look at Nebraska versus Louisville. They can't look that far ahead. But I would be really intrigued to see what Nebraska-Louisville would look like. I think that would be a fun little matchup right there. And I really think that matchup right there could be quite the barn burner. So that is that for the NCAA tournament bracket as a whole. So the last 4 teams that made it in, I actually forgot to mention the other 2, but the last 4 teams that made it in were Ball State, Auburn, Pepperdine, and LMU. I forgot to mention about LMU and Pepperdine being the other last 4 teams that made it in. But those are the last 4 teams that made it in. So there is the first teams out, but notice how I said the word first teams out. It's not the first 4 out like it is in past years. They actually just had the first 4 out. So not the first 4 out. They had the first teams out. So they only had 3 teams that were basically left out. The first ones out. So the first team of the first ones out was Colorado State. Now Colorado State, they were really good. They had potential. Unfortunately, they lost in the quarterfinals of the Mountain West Conference tournament. If they had made it at least to the semifinals, I think they could have snuck in. I think they maybe could have gotten the nod over maybe Ball State or Auburn, but unfortunately that was not the case, and losing in the quarterfinals just did not help their case. They lost to San Diego State. That is not a good thing, especially when you're losing to the lowest seed of the tournament. Second team that was one of the last ones in, or the first ones out, was Texas State. So Texas State, here's my thing. Texas State is a perennial team, and they are always going to be good in terms of the Sun Belt Conference. Unfortunately, they fell short to James Madison in the conference finals, or the conference tournament finals, but they could have probably gotten in. But that loss, they had a loss to Alabama. That's not a good loss right there. That's all that needs to be said. You lose to Alabama, you're not getting into no NCAA tournament. And then the last one to close out the whole NCAA tournament thing was UCLA. They were the last of the first teams out to miss the tournament. So I feel for UCLA. They really turned the corner during the last week of the season. They beat Washington State in 5. But then they lost to USC. They lost to USC both times. If they beat USC at least one time, UCLA is probably in the NCAA tournament. And I feel for UCLA, and I'm hoping this isn't the case, but that might... I'm not going to say it. Never mind. I'm hoping that doesn't affect their other players or that affects their coaching staff. I think UCLA is going to be back next year. Obviously, stuff happens like this. So for UCLA, it is a tough end to their season, being one of the first ones out of the NCAA tournament. But that's just how life goes. They obviously were missing Mac May, who graduated last season. But overall, it's just tough. That's just how life goes. So that's going to do it for the NCAA tournament and the last teams out and the last 4 in, as well as the first teams out. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. It's time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I appreciate you all tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I definitely appreciate you. Shout out to Patty Bax, who was listening. She informed me that she was listening live. I definitely do appreciate you, Patty. Definitely check out her show, The Buffalo Huddle, every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Central. It really means a lot to me. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have a great rest of the week. Enjoy the volleyball action that is happening. And I will see you this Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. But again, enjoy that volleyball action, and I'll see you on the other side. Peace!